"You're not the kind of guest we normally see here," the receptionist said sharply, her voice slicing through the marble lobby like a knife, echoing off the high ceilings and polished floors. Victoria Bennett paused at the entrance, the soft light catching the subtle shimmer of her gray sweater, her black jeans fitting perfectly, but nothing about her appearance screamed the multi-billionaire CEO of Bennett Enterprises. She didn't flinch, didn't even raise her voice. Around her, the presidential suite's lobby was quiet, almost eerily so, guests pausing mid-step to glance toward the source of the tension. Victoria slid her ID and card across the counter, the motion slow and deliberate, forcing the receptionist's eyes to track it as though it were a threat. The receptionist's smirk faltered when Victoria met her gaze steadily, a calm that carried the weight of someone who had spent decades mastering rooms like this, observing and waiting for the right moment. Behind her, a young man filming the scene on his phone whispered to his companion, "What's going on here?" But his voice was drowned in the sudden, tight hush that had wrapped the room. Victoria stepped closer to the counter, each footfall measured, confident, the faintest smile playing on her lips, a quiet signal that she knew exactly how this morning would unfold. The receptionist leaned forward, trying to assert authority. "Are you sure you booked the right suite?" And Victoria's eyes didn't waver. She simply extended her hand, letting the cards lie between them, untouched, her presence commanding attention without a word. A few guests shifted uneasily, sensing the power struggle but unable to interpret it fully, their murmurs subdued, their cameras raised just slightly. Victoria's assistant was already on her phone, eyes flicking across a tablet, a silent acknowledgement that the protocol they had rehearsed was in motion. The tension in the lobby thickened like the quiet before a storm, every polished surface reflecting the anticipation, the air charged with the unspoken awareness that something significant was about to happen. The receptionist's fingers hovered above the intercom, unsure whether to call security or let the situation resolve itself, while Victoria's gaze swept across the room slowly, connecting briefly with each person, measuring reactions, waiting, still calm, still unreadable. And in that pregnant moment of silence, the lobby seemed suspended in time, the sharp scent of polished marble and fresh flowers mixing with the heat of tension, Victoria's quiet authority radiating like a low hum through the space, signaling that the quietest person in the room was about to become the center of attention, and that nothing about this encounter would end as anyone expected. Victoria Bennett stood quietly as the receptionist reached for a form, her movements slow, almost deliberate, a subtle tension vibrating in the air. Guests who had been watching began to murmur softly, their voices low but filled with curiosity, some raising their phones slightly to capture the unfolding moment. The lobby, previously a place of polished calm, now felt suspended between uncertainty and expectation. Victoria adjusted her posture, shoulders back, chin slightly raised, and the soft light from the towering windows caught the edges of her dark hair, giving her a halo of quiet authority. She had rehearsed this in her mind countless times, the way a chess player studies the board, anticipating reactions, calculating timing, controlling the energy in the room without a single raised voice. Behind the counter, the receptionist faltered, shifting weight from one foot to the other, trying to maintain control while clearly feeling the impact of Victoria's presence. A young concierge stepped to the side, whispering to a colleague, "Is she really alone?" Victoria's eyes scanned the room in a slow sweep, making contact with several guests, each glance measured and intentional, a silent assertion that she belonged exactly where she stood. The faint hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of elevator chimes seemed amplified against the thickening tension. She pulled a small leather case from her bag, the movement understated but deliberate, and tapped a sequence on her phone that activated a discreet verification process, a quiet assertion of her authority that would soon be undeniable. In the corner, a junior staff member shifted nervously, unsure whether to intervene, to question, or to follow the example of her calm confidence. Victoria did not speak, yet her presence communicated every necessary instruction. The receptionist finally cleared her throat, a high, nervous sound that drew attention, attempting to regain control. "Ma'am, I will need additional identification." Victoria lifted her head, maintaining a steady gaze, her expression unreadable but resolute, and slowly slid her second card across the counter, the gesture fluid, controlled, with an air of inevitability. A murmur ran through the nearby guests as their attention sharpened, the tension coiling in the room like a living thing, waiting. The young man recording shifted slightly, bringing his phone closer, careful not to interrupt the stillness, sensing the build of authority in every silent motion. Victoria's assistant, out of view of the lobby, confirmed the activation on her end, a quiet nod to a protocol designed to handle exactly this scenario. The receptionist hesitated, visibly thrown off, her fingers brushing against the intercom as if debating whether to summon backup. Victoria remained seated, her composure absolute, eyes tracking every subtle movement, every flinch, every whisper, until the receptionist's smirk faded completely and the entire space seemed to tilt subtly, anticipation thick in the air, signaling that the first move of a larger, inevitable shift had begun and that Victoria was quietly, methodically in control. The receptionist glanced around nervously, clearly feeling the weight of the unfolding situation, and called over a colleague, whispering just loud enough for Victoria to hear. "Do you know who she is?" Victoria's gaze did not shift, her posture unwavering, each movement calculated, a silent command that spoke louder than any raised voice. The lobby seemed to hold its breath, the guests leaning forward slightly, curiosity mixed with anticipation, sensing that the quiet woman in front of them was no ordinary guest. A bell chimed in the distance, and Victoria's eyes followed the sound briefly before returning to the receptionist, her expression serene, yet undeniably authoritative. The young man recording subtly adjusted his phone, capturing every moment, while a middle-aged couple in the corner exchanged uncertain glances, murmuring to one another about the boldness of the interaction. Victoria reached into her bag once more, pulling out a slim tablet and tapping the screen, activating a discreet verification protocol that would confirm her reservation and status beyond dispute. The receptionist's hands trembled slightly as she handled the documents, the lines of doubt and tension on her face deepening with each passing second. From the far side of the lobby, a junior staff member stepped closer, curiosity and admiration mingling in their expression, watching Victoria manage the space without raising her voice or showing any impatience. Victoria's eyes swept the room in a slow, deliberate arc, taking in the guests, the staff, and the subtle movements that might indicate an attempt to assert control. She maintained her calm, the quiet confidence radiating outward, creating an invisible force that seemed to push back against the tension building in the room. A manager, tall and impeccably dressed, approached with measured steps, trying to reclaim authority, and Victoria met his gaze evenly, acknowledging his presence without a flicker of recognition for the challenge. "Ma'am, we will need additional verification for the suite," he said, his tone polite but firm, yet there was an underlying edge of uncertainty. Victoria lifted her chin slightly and extended her tablet across the counter, the gesture deliberate, ensuring all eyes were on the evidence of her reservation, her calm demeanor emphasizing the authority she carried effortlessly. The lobby had grown quieter, the earlier whispers now subdued as the guests watched with rapt attention, sensing the subtle shift of power. Every click of her fingers on the tablet echoed faintly in the polished space, a reminder that she controlled the situation entirely through presence, precision, and quiet authority. The receptionist froze mid-motion, caught between protocol and the undeniable truth, her lips parting slightly, unsure of how to respond to a situation that had escalated beyond her control without a single raised voice. Victoria remained seated, serene, letting the protocol finalize its verification, eyes scanning the room once more, connecting briefly with a few guests who nodded subtly, their expressions reflecting recognition of the quiet command she wielded. In that suspended moment, the lobby felt electric, the air thick with expectation and the subtle hum of technology confirming her reservation, a quiet affirmation that the authority she carried was now visible to everyone present, and that the unfolding events were only the beginning of the realization that she was in full control. The manager stepped forward, adjusting his tie, attempting to assert control, his polished shoes clicking faintly against the marble floor as he addressed Victoria Bennett with measured politeness. "Ma'am, I will need further confirmation for access to the presidential suite." Victoria lifted her eyes slowly, letting them sweep across the lobby, the subtle calm in her posture radiating a quiet power that made the manager hesitate, his words hanging in the air without resolution. A cluster of guests had gathered near the perimeter, some leaning slightly, others holding their phones discreetly, capturing the interaction, their attention unwavering as they watched a silent authority unfold before them. Victoria reached for the tablet on the counter and swiped her credentials, the screen illuminating her name and reservation, a quiet verification that would leave no room for doubt. The receptionist recoiled slightly, her composure cracking under the certainty in Victoria's movements, while a young guest whispered, "I did not expect her to be so poised." Victoria's assistant tapped on a nearby device, confirming the activation of the verification protocol, while Victoria maintained a relaxed stance. Her weight shifted slightly to one leg, projecting calm dominance across the room. The manager exhaled slowly, eyes darting to the tablet, scanning the details that now confirmed what Victoria had silently asserted from the beginning. A murmur ran through the guests, their curiosity blending with a rising recognition of the shift in authority, their phones capturing not only the document but the demeanor, the precision, and the unmistakable confidence she carried. Victoria inclined her head just slightly, a subtle signal to the assistant that the next phase of her presence could proceed, and the lobby seemed to hold its breath, suspended in anticipation of the inevitable acknowledgement that she commanded the space without a word. The manager glanced back at the receptionist, a silent plea for guidance, realizing that his attempts to control the narrative were futile in the face of Victoria's composed authority. Victoria's gaze shifted to the guests, meeting several eyes with an imperceptible nod that conveyed assurance, a quiet affirmation that she had orchestrated this interaction from the moment she entered, guiding it with subtlety, precision, and deliberate calm. The hum of the lobby's ventilation became almost a rhythmic backdrop to the unspoken dialogue of power, as Victoria's presence dominated the space with an authority that did not demand recognition but naturally elicited it. Each gesture, each glance, each deliberate motion created a flow of influence that the manager and receptionist could not interrupt, the subtlety of her command reverberating through the polished surfaces, reflecting in the glass doors, the marble, and the eyes of the onlookers who now leaned slightly closer, sensing the quiet inevitability of the unfolding moment. Victoria's breathing remained even, her posture unshaken, while the manager shifted again, realizing that the verification, the protocol, and the quiet authority of her presence had created a space where her control was unquestionable, and the room had become a theater of anticipation, every subtle sound amplified, every whispered speculation reflecting the impact of a calm, deliberate, and undeniable power quietly asserting itself. Victoria Bennett finally lifted her hand, the tablet resting lightly in her palm, and with a measured tap activated a discreet audio confirmation that traveled through the lobby's internal system. The manager flinched, realizing instantly that every word spoken, every action taken in the previous minutes had been logged and could be reviewed in real time. Guests turned slightly in their seats, the hum of curiosity spreading quietly as they noticed the subtle shift in body language from the staff, who were now visibly tense, glancing at each other uncertainly. Victoria remained seated, calm, yet her presence filled the space entirely, commanding attention without any forceful gestures. The young recording guest adjusted the phone, capturing the interplay of authority and hesitation, and a few whispered, "She has them exactly where she wants." The receptionist's smirk had faded completely, replaced by a tight line, eyes flicking nervously between the tablet, the manager, and Victoria herself. Every subtle movement from Victoria was deliberate, each blink, each small tilt of the head carrying weight, projecting quiet assurance that contrasted sharply with the unsettled demeanor of the hotel staff. In the back of the room, a junior concierge leaned closer to the front desk, whispering to a colleague, "I think she owns this place." The words barely audible but enough to ripple through the lobby as more guests caught fragments, murmurs spreading like a low wave. Victoria's assistant, unseen behind the counter, confirmed a sequence on her device, initiating a full verification protocol that would confirm Victoria's identity and reservation with unchallengeable clarity. The manager took a cautious step forward, but Victoria's gaze met his without moving, holding him in a silent assertion that her control was absolute. The lobby seemed suspended in this quiet tension, every polished surface reflecting the scene back, every guest now aware of the unfolding reality. The faint click of the tablet confirmed the verification had succeeded, and Victoria's eyes briefly scanned the room, connecting silently with those observing, signaling that the subtle orchestration was complete and the balance of authority had fully shifted. The receptionist, caught between protocol and recognition of the undeniable truth, straightened slightly, as if bracing for the next move, while the manager's polished composure began to crack under the quiet but undeniable demonstration of power. Victoria adjusted her posture, relaxed yet commanding, allowing the calm energy to radiate through the lobby, reinforcing that she controlled the situation entirely through presence, precision, and an unwavering confidence. The guests leaned in, some holding their phones at the ready, others simply watching, sensing the subtle but absolute change in the atmosphere, realizing that the woman they had observed quietly asserting herself was the one in control of every element of the room. A soft breath of anticipation seemed to pass through the space, and in that suspended moment, it was clear to everyone that Victoria Bennett was not just a guest, not just an authority, but the rightful orchestrator of the lobby, her quiet confidence reshaping the energy, commanding recognition, and preparing the stage for the moment when the staff would fully acknowledge her presence and power. Victoria Bennett finally rose from her seat, her movements deliberate, each step across the polished marble floor measured and calm, drawing the attention of everyone in the lobby. The manager and receptionist exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier confidence diminished under the quiet, commanding presence of Victoria. Guests shifted in their seats, leaning slightly forward, some capturing the moment on their phones, sensing the shift of power without anyone raising their voice. Victoria extended her hand, presenting the tablet to the manager once more, the verification protocol confirming her reservation clearly visible, each detail undeniable, leaving no room for dispute. A junior staff member nearby murmured, "She has full control," and the words seemed to ripple through the room, affecting the staff and guests alike. The receptionist's lips pressed together, her fingers twitching slightly, unsure whether to comply or resist, while Victoria maintained a calm, steady gaze that communicated an unspoken authority over the situation. The air in the lobby was thick with anticipation, every polished surface reflecting the subtle movements of those present, amplifying the tension and focusing attention on Victoria as she methodically confirmed each point of her identity and authority. Her assistant, slightly out of view, continued to oversee the protocol, ensuring that every verification step completed without interruption, while Victoria's eyes swept the room, connecting with the guests who had been quietly observing, acknowledging their presence and the support building in small, perceptible waves. The manager took a hesitant step back, glancing at the tablet and then at Victoria, the realization sinking in that every challenge to her presence had been anticipated and neutralized with quiet precision. Victoria's posture remained composed, relaxed yet commanding, her calm energy radiating through the lobby, filling every corner with a sense of control and inevitability. The young recording guest shifted slightly to capture the expressions of the staff and the reactions of the visitors, their whispers adding to the growing awareness that Victoria's authority was absolute in this space. Each movement, each glance, each deliberate pause reinforced her position, creating a ripple of respect that moved outward from her center, influencing everyone in the room. The receptionist took a small, cautious step forward, still uncertain, while Victoria's gaze did not waver, holding the staff in a quiet but unmistakable assertion of dominance, her calm confidence now unmistakable to everyone present. The lobby felt suspended in this charged moment, the soft hum of the air conditioning and the subtle clinking of glasses from a nearby display forming an almost rhythmic backdrop to the silent drama unfolding, as Victoria's presence continued to command attention and respect, establishing the stage for the inevitable recognition of her rightful authority and the resolution that was quietly, inevitably approaching. Victoria Bennet leaned slightly forward, the faintest crease forming at the corner of her eyes as she surveyed the lobby, her calm intensity commanding attention without a single word. The manager shifted uncomfortably, his polished shoes scraping lightly against the marble, the authority he had attempted to project moments ago fading in the quiet weight of Victoria's presence. Guests murmured softly, some tilting their phones to capture the unfolding scene. Their whispers a gentle undercurrent to the silent assertion of power radiating from Victoria. A junior concierge, who had been quietly observing from the side, took a hesitant step closer, eyes widening as the verification on Victoria's tablet completed successfully, leaving no ambiguity about her authority and status. The receptionist exhaled slowly, the tension coiling in her shoulders, her hands hovering uncertainly over the intercom, unsure whether to call for backup or yield to the undeniable confirmation of Victoria's presence. Victoria adjusted the tablet slightly, her movements precise, deliberate, allowing the information displayed on the screen to speak for itself, while she maintained an unshakable composure that seemed to fill the entire lobby. The manager glanced at the guests, who were now leaning forward subtly, sensing the unfolding dynamic, their eyes shifting between Victoria and the staff, absorbing the realization that the balance of authority had decisively shifted. Victoria's assistant, monitoring the protocol from a nearby device, gave a subtle nod, signaling that every step had been executed perfectly, reinforcing the quiet power Victoria held over the space. The lobby felt suspended, the polished surfaces reflecting both the subtle movements of Victoria and the collective recognition of the guests who had gathered to witness her calm assertion of control. Each small gesture from Victoria, the tilt of her head, the deliberate placement of the tablet, the unwavering gaze, reinforced her command, creating an invisible but undeniable presence that radiated outward, touching every staff member, every guest, and every observer. A few guests exchanged glances, their subtle nods acknowledging the shift, while the manager stepped back slightly, his authority now tempered by the absolute clarity of Victoria's rightful place in the suite. The receptionist straightened, her earlier smirk replaced with a tight, uncertain line, her body language betraying both respect and hesitation, realizing that any attempt to challenge Victoria further would be futile. Victoria allowed her eyes to sweep across the lobby one final time, connecting silently with the guests and staff, communicating a controlled assurance that she held the entire situation in her hands. The quiet in the room deepened, the air thick with anticipation and recognition, each person present absorbing the subtle, yet powerful signal that Victoria Bennet was not merely a guest, but the rightful orchestrator of the space, her calm authority now fully recognized and undisputed, setting the stage for the next steps that would soon unfold with quiet but decisive resolution. Victoria Bennet lowered herself slightly into a composed stance, her hands resting lightly on the edge of the counter, each finger deliberate, every movement precise, radiating an effortless control over the lobby and its occupants. The manager shifted his weight again, attempting to reassert authority, but the subtle, quiet confidence emanating from Victoria held him at bay, his voice faltering before any words could carry weight. Guests leaned slightly forward in their seats, their phones capturing the unfolding calm yet commanding scene, murmuring softly to one another about the undeniable presence Victoria carried. A young staff member, standing near the side desk, exchanged glances with a colleague, both sensing the invisible shift of power that had permeated the space. Victoria's assistant tapped a few final commands into a device, ensuring every verification point was completed seamlessly, the confirmation reflected on the tablet now glowing softly, irrefutable, and precise. The receptionist's posture stiffened, her earlier smirk replaced by a controlled unease as she realized that every attempt to undermine Victoria's presence had failed, the verification displaying the truth that could no longer be questioned. The polished marble underfoot reflected the light from the tall windows, catching the subtle movements of Victoria as she adjusted her stance slightly, a measured, almost imperceptible nod signaling that the protocol had reached its final stage. The manager glanced toward the guests, their expressions a mixture of intrigue and recognition, their collective attention reinforcing the undeniable authority Victoria held. A hush fell over the lobby, broken only by the quiet hum of the ventilation system and the occasional click from a phone recording the scene. The atmosphere heavy with anticipation as everyone sensed that the culmination of Victoria's calm orchestration was imminent. She shifted her gaze slowly, connecting silently with several guests, each glance a gentle affirmation of her control, her measured patience conveying far more than any raised voice could. The receptionist's hands hovered, uncertain, over the intercom, caught between adherence to procedure and the undeniable reality of Victoria's authority. Victoria remained still, her presence alone asserting dominance through quiet assurance, every detail of her posture, every subtle movement reinforcing her rightful position. The young recording guest adjusted the phone slightly, capturing the interplay of reactions from staff and visitors, the whispers of observers carrying through the lobby, amplifying the subtle recognition of her power. The manager's polished composure continued to waver, eyes flicking from the tablet to Victoria and back again, as he realized that the verification, the careful orchestration, and the quiet authority radiating from her had created a space where his influence had been rendered secondary. Victoria's slight tilt of her head, her controlled breathing, and the serene precision of each motion communicated a mastery over the room that went unquestioned, the lobby itself seeming to pause in acknowledgement of the shift, a suspended anticipation that heralded the next steps of quiet, unassailable control about to unfold. Victoria Bennett shifted slightly, her hand brushing the edge of the tablet as she confirmed the final step of the verification protocol, the soft glow from the screen illuminating her composed expression. The manager exhaled sharply, realizing that the documentation, the live verification, and the sequence of confirmations left him without any room to challenge her presence or authority. Guests had leaned in subtly, phones held at the ready, capturing every precise, calm motion as Victoria's quiet power filled the space. A junior staff member, still observing from the side, whispered to a colleague, "She has complete control of this lobby," and the words seemed to echo softly, spreading a subtle ripple of recognition and awe. The receptionist's hands hovered near the intercom, her posture stiff, her composure wavering under the undeniable authority Victoria radiated, while the manager's polished demeanor showed the first signs of uncertainty, his eyes scanning the tablet and then returning to Victoria as if seeking guidance. Victoria remained seated with an effortless poise, her gaze sweeping slowly across the room, connecting subtly with the guests who had become silent witnesses, each glance reinforcing her unspoken control. The hum of the lobby's air conditioning, the faint clinking of decorative glass from the side display, and the subtle movement of observers all combined into a rhythmic backdrop that heightened the sense of poised anticipation, every element of the space responding to her presence. Her assistant, unseen behind the counter, gave a final nod, confirming that every verification step had completed successfully, the protocol now fully executed, leaving no question of her rightful place. The manager shifted again, realizing that any further attempt to assert authority would be both futile and visible to the guests who were now watching intently, their curiosity mingling with recognition of the subtle orchestration that Victoria had executed flawlessly. Victoria adjusted her posture slightly, leaning in with measured grace, each motion deliberate and controlled, projecting confidence that filled every corner of the lobby. Guests murmured softly, sharing glances that acknowledged the shift, some tilting their phones to capture the reactions of the staff, as well as Victoria's composed demeanor. The receptionist exhaled, lips pressed tightly together, finally lowering her hands. And for the first time in minutes, the staff in the lobby hesitated, caught between protocol and the undeniable reality that the authority Victoria carried was absolute. Every subtle movement, from the tilt of her head to the calm positioning of her tablet, reinforced the silent message of control and command, the room itself seeming to bend to her presence. A quiet nod from Victoria's assistant signaled that all internal processes were complete, and the lobby held a collective breath, the guests sensing that the next acknowledgement from the staff was inevitable, that the balance of authority had shifted entirely, and that Victoria Bennett's calm, measured, and undeniable power was now recognized and unchallenged. Victoria Bennett finally rose fully from the counter, her posture straight, composed, and deliberate, every movement signaling an unspoken command over the lobby. The manager took a cautious step back, eyes narrowing as he glanced at the tablet in her hand, the verification protocol fully displayed, confirming her reservation and authority beyond dispute. Guests leaned forward slightly, their phones capturing the precise, controlled scene, whispers spreading softly about the quiet confidence and undeniable command Victoria radiated. The receptionist's hands hovered briefly over the intercom, uncertain, her posture stiff, a visible reflection of the shift in power now evident in the space. Victoria's gaze swept across the room slowly, connecting with each staff member, each guest, her eyes calm, measured, and quietly authoritative, leaving no doubt that she was in control. A junior concierge, observing from the side, murmured under their breath to a colleague, "She is fully in charge," and the words seemed to ripple through the lobby, influencing even the hesitant body language of the staff. The soft hum of the air conditioning, the faint click of keys from Victoria's assistant unseen behind the counter, and the subtle shifting of polished marble underfoot created a rhythmic tension, highlighting the quiet dominance that Victoria carried effortlessly. She adjusted the tablet slightly, the light illuminating her composed face, a gentle confirmation of her authority that required no vocal assertion, no raised hand, no demand, yet filled the room with unmistakable presence. Guests exchanged glances, some tilting their phones to capture reactions, others simply observing the subtle interplay of confidence and hesitation, sensing the gravity of the situation. The manager's polished composure faltered further, a flicker of acknowledgement, crossing his expression as he realized the full extent of Victoria's quiet orchestration. The receptionist straightened slightly, the tight line of her lips betraying a mix of respect and unease as she slowly stepped back, conceding the space with a minimal gesture of compliance. Victoria's assistant signaled with a small nod, confirming the final step of the internal protocol, while Victoria remained serene, her gaze sweeping once more across the lobby, acknowledging the shift in energy, the recognition building among guests, and the silent acquiescence of the staff. Each measured step Victoria took, each subtle glance, each slight movement of her hands, reinforced her authority, creating an invisible but palpable presence that held the room in quiet suspense. The guests leaned in subtly, watching, feeling the weight of her calm control, understanding without words that Victoria Bennett now fully commanded the lobby, her presence alone shaping the responses, the posture, and the awareness of everyone in the space. The manager exhaled slowly, the first sign of yielding to the inevitable, while the lobby itself seemed to pause, suspended in a quiet recognition that the balance of authority had irrevocably shifted, and Victoria's composed, deliberate, and undeniable command was now the central focus, preparing the stage for the forthcoming acknowledgement and final resolution. Victoria Bennett straightened fully, the light from the lobby windows catching the edges of her dark hair, giving her a quiet halo of authority. The manager exhaled slowly, clearly realizing that every attempt to assert control had been neutralized by the calm precision of her presence. Guests shifted slightly in their seats, their phones still recording, capturing every subtle motion, every silent command she issued without speaking. A junior concierge took a small step forward, eyes wide, whispering under their breath to a colleague, "She is in charge," and the words seemed to spread like a ripple through the staff. The receptionist glanced at the tablet, confirming the verification details, then at Victoria, recognizing finally that her authority was absolute and unassailable. Victoria allowed her gaze to sweep the room, connecting briefly with the guests, acknowledging their attention, their presence, and the growing recognition that she had orchestrated the entire scene flawlessly. The air in the lobby felt heavier now, the anticipation tangible, every polished surface reflecting the subtle movements of the staff, the soft sway of Victoria's stance, and the quiet hum of the air conditioning blending into a rhythm that underscored the magnitude of her influence. Victoria's assistant tapped a final command into a hidden device, signaling the completion of the protocol, and the tablet confirmed, displaying the information clearly and without ambiguity. The manager's eyes flicked from the display to Victoria, realizing that the situation had fully shifted, that his previous authority was now secondary, and that every step had been anticipated and met with quiet precision. Guests leaned slightly closer, their whispers soft, commenting among themselves about the confidence, the calm control, and the subtle mastery she displayed, each observer now a silent witness to the power she wielded effortlessly. Victoria's posture remained relaxed yet commanding, her hands lightly resting on the counter, every movement deliberate, emphasizing her presence without force or urgency. The receptionist's shoulders slumped subtly, the tension in her hands dissipating as she recognized the inevitability of compliance, while the manager hesitated, glancing around the lobby, aware that any further action without acknowledgement of Victoria's authority would be noticed by the attentive guests. Victoria's gaze returned to the staff, her eyes conveying patience and quiet expectation, a subtle signal that the next step would be simple, controlled, and inevitable. Each guest felt the energy shift palpably, the quiet confidence radiating from her influencing the entire room, guiding the staff toward recognition without a single raised voice. The lobby held its collective breath, every subtle movement, every quiet nod, and every careful step reinforcing the undeniable presence of Victoria Bennett as the orchestrator of the space. The room seemed suspended in this moment, the guests watching intently, the staff now fully aware of the balance of authority, and the unspoken understanding settling in that Victoria's calm, deliberate control was complete, unchallenged, and about to guide the next phase of acknowledgement and resolution. Victoria Bennett exhaled softly, the subtle movement of her shoulders signaling a quiet command as she observed the final reactions of the staff, each glance from her eyes carrying an unspoken authority that the lobby had come to recognize. The manager shifted uneasily, his polished shoes scraping lightly on the marble as he realized that the verification, the calm precision, and the deliberate execution of each step had left him without any leverage, the balance of power now fully resting with Victoria. Guests murmured softly to each other, phones raised discreetly, capturing the silent mastery unfolding, their eyes widening as they noted the measured control she exercised over every detail, every subtle interaction, and every hesitant motion of the staff. The receptionist's hands lowered slowly, her posture finally relaxing, and a hint of reluctant acknowledgement flickered across her features, signaling that the quiet authority Victoria projected was not to be questioned. Victoria's assistant gave a subtle, barely perceptible nod, confirming that the internal protocol was complete, and the room responded with a palpable shift, the air itself seeming lighter as the staff absorbed the reality that their previous attempts to assert control had been elegantly neutralized. Victoria moved her gaze across the lobby once more, connecting silently with the guests, the junior staff, and even the manager, her eyes calm, steady, and unwavering, reinforcing the subtle message that her presence alone was sufficient to direct the space. The guests, leaning slightly forward, exchanged soft whispers, the collective awareness growing that they were witnessing a demonstration of authority that did not rely on volume or theatrics, but on composure, precision, and quiet confidence. The polished surfaces of the marble floors reflected the light and the careful movements of Victoria, each step, each tilt of the head, each subtle gesture amplifying the sense of deliberate mastery she held over the environment. A young concierge, standing off to the side, whispered to a colleague, "She has complete control now," the words drifting softly, yet carrying the acknowledgement of her influence through the room. Victoria allowed a faint, almost imperceptible smile to touch her lips, the signal that the verification had succeeded and that every subtle element had aligned to affirm her authority. The manager exhaled slowly, a slight shift in posture acknowledging the inevitability of the situation, while the receptionist stepped back subtly, her hands now completely at rest, the tension dissipating into a quiet acknowledgement of Victoria's presence. Guests tilted their phones to capture the final expressions, the stillness, and the subtle nods that communicated the room's new understanding. Victoria's eyes swept across the space one final time, connecting with each observer, silently asserting that the balance had shifted, the staff now aware, and the guests fully witnessing the quiet, controlled command she exercised, leaving the lobby in a suspended moment of recognition where the subtlety of her authority spoke louder than any word, preparing the stage for the inevitable acknowledgement and resolution that would follow with clarity and unchallenged presence. Victoria Bennett took a slow, deliberate step back from the counter, her presence still commanding the attention of the entire lobby, yet her movements calm, almost effortless. The manager straightened his posture, acknowledging internally the shift in authority that had taken place, the verification and precise orchestration leaving him with no room for challenge. Guests continued to murmur softly, phones raised, capturing every measured glance, every subtle gesture, each movement a demonstration of quiet command. The receptionist exhaled, her earlier tension softened, recognizing that the authority Victoria projected was absolute, and that compliance was now the only reasonable course. Victoria's assistant, visible only from the corner of the room, gave a subtle nod, confirming that all protocols had been executed flawlessly, and the tablet reflected the final affirmation of Victoria's status and reservation. A few guests exchanged glances, whispering softly, noting the precise control, the calm yet undeniable presence that Victoria carried, and how effortlessly she had shifted the energy of the room. The junior concierge, still observing from the side, whispered again, this time more audibly, "She is completely in charge," and the words rippled subtly through the lobby, touching both staff and visitors. Victoria's gaze swept slowly across the space, connecting with each person without haste, without urgency, communicating silently that she had orchestrated every detail and that the recognition of her authority was now complete. The manager's eyes flicked from the tablet to Victoria, a quiet acknowledgement passing across his expression, and the receptionist's shoulders relaxed, her hands no longer hesitant as the finality of the verification settled in the space. The lobby seemed to pause, each polished surface reflecting the subtle movements, the calm dominance, and the quiet energy that Victoria radiated, reinforcing that her presence alone commanded respect and attention. Guests leaned slightly forward, their whispers mixing with the subtle hum of the ventilation system, phones capturing not only the document verification but the overall mastery Victoria displayed without any need for volume or theatrics. Every detail, from the tilt of her head to the light movement of her hands on the counter, emphasized deliberate and controlled authority, creating a quiet ripple of recognition that extended across the staff, the manager, and the visitors alike. Victoria exhaled gently, a faint, almost imperceptible smile tracing her lips, signaling both completion and acknowledgement of the room's shift. The air in the lobby, previously charged with tension, now held a subtle, almost electric calm, the guests and staff collectively recognizing that the balance of authority had irrevocably shifted. Victoria Bennett, composed, deliberate, and quietly powerful, had fully asserted her control, every observer aware that the unfolding resolution was complete, her authority now unchallenged, and the stage set for the subtle yet undeniable acknowledgement of her command throughout the lobby.